Soaring cases threaten to jeopardise Christmas celebrations.
COVID cases are continuing to surge.
The Prime Minister is urging people to keep calm and carry on.
We're going into 2022 looking through the front windscreen, not through the rear vision mirror. And Australia can now open up.
Clinics like car parks and traffic chaos.
Queues as far as the eye can see.
And hospitals are feeling the strain. Vaccination and testing regimes around the country are buckling under the strain of escalating COVID cases.
We're going through a gear change when it comes to how we manage testing arrangements, the definition of close contacts.
Personal responsibility is key.
Insisting that limiting the spread comes down to personal responsibility.
We have to move from a culture of mandates to a culture of responsibility. We don't have to mandate people wearing sunscreen and wearing hats in summer.
If I don't put sunscreen on, you're not the one who gets sunburned.
The New South Wales Premier, Dominic Perrottet, announcing some changes. From midnight tonight, masks indoors will be mandatory.
Australia's booster program has been accelerated in the wake of the new Omicron variant.
Will now be able to get their booster shot after 3 months to help fight the incoming Omicron wave.
We all hope to be moving on from the pandemic in 2022.
It's a new year and a new COVID record.
Well, Brett, is this the safest gathering in Canberra? We're all triple vaxxed, boosted, with all that COVID.
I think, like most of the country, it managed to track everyone down, no matter if you're in Western Australia or Queensland. COVID was the theme of the Christmas period.
Yeah, Christmas for many Australians, summer for many Australians has been an absolute shocker. What's summer meant to be about? It's meant to be, for a government at least, or any political side, it's meant to be about when all of those simmering tensions cool. But instead, for Scott Morrison and his government, all those simmering tensions have just boiled over. We have had everyone with politics suddenly in their lives at a time when politics is meant to get out of their lives. We haven't been able to see our families or friends. We've had shocking shortages of PCRs and rats. Politics has even infected the tennis. So politics has not been able to cool in any sense. If anything, it's heated.
It really has been like the summer of discontent. As you say, plans cancelled. We had almost a shadow shutdown. Businesses couldn't find staff because, as we mentioned, it seemed half of Australia got COVID at the same time. The other half were thrust into isolation. People weren't going out. And then, yeah, the massive pressure on the testing system, PCR system became overwhelmed, and you could not find a rapid test for love nor money. And these things are meant to be the key to living with COVID.
You saw that fractured federation approach, right? So some states were insisting that if you want to travel to our state for Christmas, you need to get a PCR test. The trouble was, as Omicron surged, you had people with symptoms needing tests, and then you're adding in people with no symptoms that need a test just to be able to travel.
But I think if we're looking at the politics of all of this, people are pissed and they're taking out their anger on Scott Morrison, and that's a problem for him.
We also made an announcement in relation to rapid antigen testing. We need to move away from PCR testing.
Rapid antigen tests are now central to confirming COVID-positive cases and easing pressure on testing facilities.
The Prime Minister is resisting calls to make rapid antigen tests free for everyone.
We just can't go round and make everything free.
As soon as they hit the shelves, they're gone. We're told the do-it-yourself kits will be in short supply for weeks.
There's nothing new about these rapid antigen tests. You've had people in places like the UK being dished out everywhere for free. So how is it that we get to our big surge and there's barely a rat in the country?
The Australian government made a decision that it was going to allow the free market to acquire and distribute rats. It didn't do what it did with other supplies at the start of the pandemic, where it effectively stockpiled things like masks, gloves, PPE. And so that is the question that Labor has really put to the government. Why have you not spent months stockpiling these essential items and instead left it to the free market, which might have been a more efficient way of distributing it, but has really led to things like price gouging and just this chronic shortage that we've seen across the country?
Now, if you are going to leave it to the free market in Australia, they can't compete with a nation that's trying to buy tens of millions. It showed perhaps that it was a short-sighted view, given that the warnings were back in August that we would need millions and millions of these rat tests.
Well, particularly as the rhetoric changed, we're meant to be living with this virus. The trouble was, you had all these businesses across the country where they've got workers that are being deemed to be close contacts. They wanted to just have a rat test to go back to work. The trouble is, if you can't get a rat test, you can't get back to work, you get the broader economic damage of the country in a de facto shutdown.
They were missing the tool they needed to operate, and it all comes back to this shortage of rapid tests, and again, the anger is directed at the federal government.
When the problems are so apparent and they're so close to you, the population is going to look for who to blame, and that's why it's clever politics from Anthony Albanese to say it's his fault.
But he wants to really maintain that rage towards the Morrison government right up until polling day.
There have been dramatic scenes at Melbourne Airport overnight.
Tennis Australia has defended its decision to give world number one Novak Djokovic an exemption to play in this month's Australian Open.
The Prime Minister is talking tough on the Novak Djokovic situation, saying the world number one is not welcome in Australia.
Our government has strong form when it comes to securing our borders. I don't think anybody doubts that. Rules are rules.
A judge in Melbourne has overturned that decision, and Djokovic says he wants to stay in the country and compete.
As Novak Djokovic's fans celebrated a court victory of a different kind last night.
The tennis star's saga isn't over yet.
The immigration minister could still boot him out of the country.
The case once again expected to go from the tennis court back to the federal court.
The immigration minister has just cancelled the visa of world number one Novak Djokovic.
The full bench of the federal court dismissed his application to overturn the cancellation of his visa by the federal government. Novak Djokovic has been deported.
The fallout over Novak Djokovic's deportation continues.
It's fair to say that this whole incident is just not a good look for tennis or for Djokovic.
Well, the Australian Open has to be one of the great fixtures of summer.
A highlight of my summer.
A highlight, absolutely, but it has been. But even it wasn't immune from politics. We had that just, I think, embarrassing and drawn-out legal saga in the week leading up to the tournament. I mean, Probes, what happened here?
Well, it seemed that no level of government, state or federal, wanted to actually decide what to do with it. The Prime Minister was trying to judge the politics of it. At first he said it's up to the Victorian government, test the political winds, and then he decides that perhaps they should take a firmer line.
Well, because Djokovic posts that photo saying, I'm coming to Australia, I've got an exemption, and everything changes in that moment.
But we had the judge who said in the first appeal, he said, what more could this man have done? In the end, he got tossed out anyway because the government judged politically that it was better that he be booted out than he play on.
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, Scott Morrison was very happy to flip the switch to hard borders. This is an area that he's very comfortable wading into. But at the end of the day, I mean, who's going to remember Djokovic when we are still all basking in the sensational glow of Ash Barty's win on Saturday night, followed up by that epic with Rafa. So I think that is probably going to be the lingering memory from this Australian Open.
Well, from day one, their relationship has been fractured, and today, outgoing Australian of the Year Grace Tame gave the Prime Minister a frosty reception.
She wanted to make some noise, and she sure did, didn't she?
It seems to have made a few men uncomfortable.
What she achieved through the year was worthy of having a smile.
I just thought she shouldn't go. If you can't be polite in some form, then I just think don't go.
Grace Tame has certainly made an impact during her tenure.
So, Hitchy, one of the signs that the political year is really beginning to kick off is, of course, the awarding of a new Australian of the Year. Now, that's Dylan Olcott for 2022, but before we found out that he was the new Australian of the Year, we had to see off Grace Tame, who has been an incredible advocate for survivors of sexual abuse and trauma. There was this interaction with the Prime Minister at an event for Australians of the Year at the Lodge.
And it was, as you can see, I feel like you can feel it from this photo, it was an incredibly awkward interaction. It basically saw Grace shake the Prime Minister's hand, look down, not look at him, not smile, and then it sparked this very interesting, I would say, divisive is another word maybe.
Revealing, perhaps?
Yes. Coverage afterwards and conversation about whether she should have smiled, whether she should have been more grateful, should she have gone at all? And I guess the flip side to that, which was, well, you know, no. She was very clear when she was awarded the Australian of the Year award that she wasn't going to be quiet and she was going to talk about the things that mattered to her. And if you paid attention in the last year, you would know that she has been incredibly critical of the government and of Scott Morrison in particular, and the way his government has handled and reacted to a number of issues.
Exactly, and you know, a lot of Grace's campaigning is around these issues that are really horrible and they are uncomfortable. Like you said, this is an uncomfortable moment, but talking about, I guess, trauma and abuse isn't really supposed to be comfortable. You know, like you, I would be quite surprised if someone thought, oh, gee, this is a strange reaction, because as we know, the government has been really caught up in controversy around these issues, particularly sexual assault and harassment in this building, and Grace's naming as Australian of the Year last year, of course, sparked Brittany Higgins' decision to come forward and really tell her story, which, of course, led to a really huge movement of women around the country.
And even though Grace is no longer our Australian of the Year, she and Brittany Higgins are going to be speaking at the National Press Club soon. I think their advocacy together is only just beginning.
Anthony Albanese has put Scott Morrison's character at the centre of his own election pitch, using the first major political speech of the year to present himself as a safe alternative Prime Minister.
He declares, it's not my job, it's not a race, it's a matter for the states. He doesn't hold a hose and he doesn't give a rat's. Such a pathological determination to avoid responsibility.
Scott Morrison will be there at the Press Club next Tuesday on the same stage Anthony Albanese occupied today.
Protesters have blocked off streets around the National Press Club in Canberra ahead of a keynote address by the Prime Minister.
This was, of course, the Prime Minister's first major speech for this election year.
So we are here, not perfect, but still standing strong, says Scott Morrison.
I haven't got everything right. And I'll take my fair share of the criticism and the blame.
You've acknowledged today you didn't get everything right and that you understand the frustration people have felt over the summer. But do you want to take this opportunity to actually say sorry for the mistakes you've made as Prime Minister?
We're all terribly sorry for what this pandemic has done to the world and to this country.
Elections that we've had during the pandemic have really played into the favour of incumbency, but as the pandemic is going on, the power of incumbency at elections is really about to be tested in these months to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost guaranteed the election is going to be in May. Scott Morrison wants to put a lot of distance between himself and the horrors of this summer, but it is so hard to predict. He is clearly behind in the opinion polls. People are really angry with him, but I think there are two big factors that will come to play, adding a lot of volatility into politics. COVID-19, who knows what we'll be dealing with come May. The second thing I think is a sleeper issue, it's cost of living. Right now, groceries, petrol, both are on the rise. House prices are becoming prohibitively expensive. Meanwhile, wages have remained stagnant. So to what extent are those two X factors going to impact the outcome?
We've got an electoral map which is different from what we've seen in recent years. You've got a West Australian factor which we haven't seen traditionally. You've got Queensland will go in a different direction, the south coast of New South Wales, northern Tasmania. There is no national trend that you can apply across the country that will determine ultimately the election outcome.
And also, there's no guarantee the two leaders are going to be able to even campaign in Western Australia, because at this stage there's no reopening date. So that just adds another layer of complexity. And of course, Western Australia for the coalition is at a pretty high watermark. So if you start to lose seats in the West, where you've got an astonishingly popular Labor Premier, that spells, really, that's big trouble for the coalition.
And there's no small task ahead of Labor. It needs a net gain of 7 seats to form majority government. It already knows it's got some issues with some of its marginals. It will pick up some in Victoria, but it's no sure thing that Anthony Albanese will be Prime Minister come May.
Anthony Albanese's problem is that a lot of people don't know who he is. Scott Morrison's problem is that people have got to know him and too many, for the coalition's sake, have grown to dislike him.
I've been provided with a text message exchange. I've got them right here. In one, she describes you as, quote, a horrible, horrible person. The minister is even more scathing, describing you as a fraud and, quote, a complete psycho.
Well, I don't know who you're referring to or the basis of what you've put to me, but I obviously don't agree with it.
So Anthony Albanese has to reintroduce himself. Scott Morrison has to rehabilitate himself.